The biggest lie in economics, and you still believe it. The stock market crashed. Fortunes disappeared overnight. Banks failed. Businesses closed their doors. Families lost everything they had spent generations building. Across America, unemployment exploded. By 1933, roughly 1 in 4 workers had no job. Breadlines stretched for blocks. Millions struggled to find food. Entire communities of makeshift homes, later known as Hoovervilles, appeared across the country. For ordinary Americans, the Great Depression wasn't an economic statistic, it was daily survival. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat. Savings accounts vanished when banks collapsed. Families who once considered themselves middle class suddenly found themselves dependent on charity. The American economy had fallen apart. When Franklin D. Roosevelt entered the White House, he launched an unprecedented response. The New Deal created massive public works programs. The government hired millions of people to build roads, bridges, dams, schools, and other infrastructure. New agencies appeared. Relief programs expanded. Washington became more involved in the economy than ever before. And to be fair, these programs helped. They provided jobs. They reduced suffering. They restored confidence. But they did not fully end the Depression. A decade after the crash, unemployment remained stubbornly high. Even in 1939, around 15% of Americans were still out of work. Then history intervened. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The United States entered World War II. Almost immediately, the economy transformed. Factories that had been sitting idle suddenly ran around the clock. Automobile plants stopped making cars and started producing tanks. Manufacturers switched from consumer goods to military equipment. Shipyards expanded at extraordinary speed. Government spending exploded. Defense expenditures rose from a tiny share of the economy to more than a third of total economic output. Millions of jobs appeared. Unemployment collapsed. By the middle of the war, it had fallen below 2%. For many families, it seemed like prosperity had finally returned. And this created one of the most influential economic arguments of the 20th century. Many economists looked at the numbers and concluded that government spending had rescued America. The logic seemed straightforward. When consumers stop spending, the government can spend instead. World War II appeared to prove it. Case closed. Or was it? Because if wartime spending truly created prosperity, then life during the war should have been better than life before it. But that's not what happened. Imagine an American family sitting around a dinner table in 1944. The father now has a steady paycheck. The newspapers celebrate booming economic output. Government statistics show tremendous growth. Yet, the family cannot buy many of the things they want. Sugar is rationed, meat is rationed, gasoline is rationed, coffee is rationed, shoes are rationed. Even basic household goods become difficult to obtain. Automobile production for civilians effectively stops. Factories are busy producing military equipment instead. Americans save large portions of their income, not because everyone suddenly becomes financially disciplined, but because there are fewer consumer products available to purchase. In 1945, economists faced a frightening question. What happens when government spending suddenly collapses? Military contracts were ending. Defense budgets were being slashed. Millions of soldiers were returning home. Factories would need to transition away from wartime production. Many experts predicted disaster. Some warned of mass unemployment. Others expected social unrest. The logic seemed obvious. If government spending created prosperity, then removing that spending should create another depression. Even prominent political leaders feared the worst. Yet something unexpected happened. The collapse never came. Factories that had produced tanks began manufacturing refrigerators, washing machines, and automobiles. Industrial capacity shifted toward consumer demand. Businesses expanded, private investment surged, millions of returning soldiers entered civilian life. Instead of spiraling into economic catastrophe, the United States experienced one of the strongest periods of growth in its history. Unemployment remained relatively low. Consumer markets flourished. Household incomes rose. The economy adapted far more successfully than many experts predicted. This raises an uncomfortable question. What if wartime spending wasn't actually the reason for post-war prosperity? What if something else played a much larger role? To understand that possibility, we need to go back even further, back to World War I. The First World War required governments to spend unimaginable sums of money. Millions of soldiers needed weapons, uniforms, ammunition, transportation, and supplies. The costs were staggering. Traditionally, governments financed spending through taxation, but wartime expenses quickly exceeded what tax revenues could support. Many governments turned to another solution. They created money. Before World War I, much of the world operated under the gold standard. Currencies were linked to gold. Governments could not simply create unlimited amounts of money without maintaining corresponding reserves. The system imposed discipline. But wartime pressures led many countries to suspend or abandon those constraints. Once the war ended, governments faced difficult choices. Instead of restoring strict monetary discipline, many continued to expand the money supply. Countries increasingly sought competitive advantages through currency devaluation. A weaker currency could make exports cheaper and more attractive to foreign buyers. The problem was that every country could attempt the same strategy. One nation devalued, then another, then another. The result was instability. Confidence in currencies weakened, international trade suffered, economic uncertainty spread across the world. The situation became especially severe during the Great Depression. Global trade contracted dramatically. Financial systems fractured. Political extremism gained support. Many citizens lost faith in existing institutions. Economic instability contributed to social and political turmoil across multiple continents. Leaders promised simple solutions to complex problems. The consequences would be devastating. By the end of World War II, policymakers understood that rebuilding the global economy required more than reconstruction. It required restoring trust. In 1944, representatives from 44 nations gathered in New Hampshire to design a new international monetary system. The result became known as the Bretton Woods system. Its basic idea was remarkably simple. Currencies would be linked to the US dollar. The US dollar would be linked to gold. This arrangement aimed to provide stability. Exchange rates became more predictable. Businesses could make long-term plans. Investors gained greater confidence. International trade expanded. For countries recovering from war, stability mattered enormously. Entrepreneurs could borrow money with greater confidence. Manufacturers could invest in new equipment. Families could save without constantly worrying that inflation would destroy the value of their earnings. The post-war decades witnessed extraordinary growth. Western Europe recovered, Japan recovered. Global commerce expanded rapidly. Living standards improved across much of the developed world. Many factors contributed to this success, including technological progress, reconstruction, education, investment, and expanding trade. But monetary stability formed an important part of the foundation. Yet Bretton Woods contained a built-in challenge. Every country was expected to maintain discipline. But the United States occupied a unique position. The dollar served as the world's anchor currency. As long as foreign governments trusted the dollar's connection to gold, the system could function. During the 1960s, however, pressures began to emerge. The United States financed both major domestic programs and expensive overseas commitments. Government spending increased significantly. More dollars entered circulation. Meanwhile, gold reserves did not expand at the same pace. Some foreign leaders became concerned. If too many dollars existed relative to available gold, could the United States truly honor its commitments? Questions turned into actions. Countries began exchanging dollars for gold. Pressure on American reserves intensified. By the early 1970s, confidence in the system was eroding. In August 1971, President Richard Nixon announced a dramatic change. The United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold. The decision effectively ended Bretton Woods. The global monetary system entered a new era. Currencies would no longer be tied directly to gold. Instead, they would float according to market forces and government policies. Supporters argued that the new flexibility offered important advantages. Governments gained greater ability to respond to economic shocks. Central banks acquired additional tools for managing recessions and financial crises. Critics worried about something else. Without an external constraint, governments and central banks might be tempted to create excessive amounts of money. The debate continues today. Economists disagree about the causes of inflation, financial instability, and economic growth. Different schools of thought offer different explanations. Some emphasize government spending during downturns. Others stress productivity, investment, entrepreneurship, or monetary discipline. Yet one narrative remains remarkably popular. The idea is that World War II proved that government spending alone can create prosperity. The historical record is more complicated. The war undoubtedly mobilized resources and reduced measured unemployment. But wartime economies also involved rationing, shortages, price controls, and restrictions on consumer choice. The post-war boom occurred after military spending fell dramatically and resources returned to civilian production. Economic history rarely offers simple lessons. Complex events usually have multiple causes. The Great Depression, World War II, post-war growth, Bretton Woods, inflation, and modern monetary systems all involve complicated interactions between policy, institutions, technology, demographics, and human behavior. But perhaps the biggest lesson is this: numbers alone do not tell the whole story. A rising GDP does not automatically mean rising living standards. Government spending is not automatically the same as wealth creation. And economic policies should ultimately be judged by how they improve the lives of ordinary people, not merely by what appears in statistical reports. The debate over what truly ended the Great Depression continues to this day. Some argue it was wartime spending, others argue it was post-war private sector expansion. Still others point to monetary reforms, institutional changes, or a combination of many factors. But one thing is certain. The relationship between government spending, economic growth, and prosperity is far more complicated than most people realize. And that's why one of the most widely repeated claims in economics remains one of the most hotly debated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Let us know what economic myth you think deserves its own deep dive next, and we'll see you in the next one.